Welcome to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the business failure rate and why it's somewhere in the upper 90s. We're going to talk about why not all advice is good advice. We're going to talk about why big corporations are doing their best to keep you down. We're going to talk about the absolute dangers of actually borrowing money to make your business successful, and the one thing you should actually focus on that will set you up for success no matter where you're starting at in your business. And we're going to talk about why being the product service expert in your business might actually be the biggest thing leading to your failure and not your success. I'm Dennis.
And I'm Greg.
And this is the More Profit, Less Stress podcast,
where we provide the tools for more profit and less stress in your business now so you can turn into a valuable asset later. Welcome to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. I'm Greg Forzani here with Dennis Taekema, and I'd like to start the conversation with a story. So let's take a chef, a mechanic, a hairstylist, whatever. Take somebody that's really good at what they do. They're great at the service they provide or the product they sell, like that industry. They're really, really good at it. And they work in a business somewhere for somebody else, or maybe just as a hobby. And their customers are like, oh my gosh, you're so good at this. And their family and friends are like, you're so great at this. And people start saying, well, you should open your own business because you're so good at this. And the person says, well, that's a fantastic idea. I'm going to go open my own business. And then the dotted line leads to, and we've done quite a bit of research on this recently, give or take 10, 15, 20 years ago, the research kept spitting out that the rate of failure in business was about a little over 80%. Now let's define failure. They defined it as the business closing. So over the lifetime of the business, they closed. And you can get into specifics about in the first year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, there's percentages around that. That's all great. And we have those. But at the end of the day, little over 80% of businesses were closing in the lifetime of the business. Fast forward to today. Our recent research, which is super recent, says that, and we took a pretty deep dive on it, says that it's 90 to 95% of businesses are closing over the lifetime of the business. So it's actually getting worse. If we go back to our little story about our chef or plumber or whatever opens a business, the bottom line is 90 to 95% of those people are going to close and fail and have nothing. Like at the end, they will have not built an asset. So today we kind of want to talk about why that might happen. But before we get into why it might happen, let's talk about why do those people want to own a business? And I want to share an opinion, then I want to reference something Dennis said a few days ago. They own it to, freedom of hours, work for myself, build my own schedule, like all that stuff. That's great. But let's just talk money. They want to make, they believe they can make more money. Yeah, exactly. So they make more money.
Or it pays me $35 an hour, charges me out at $75. I'll just go make the $75.
Exactly. So they want to make more money, which is great. And probably a little bit, they believe like, hey, I can build this thing and at some point in time, it's worth something. I can sell it. And some will believe more in that. Some will believe less in it. The bottom line is, like, we're big believers in you should be able to build the business into an asset. And you said something a few days ago or a week ago where think of the business like a stock investment, right? Or some kind of investment.
Like a mutual fund or an RRSP or anything that you're going to put your money into that you want a return on.
Who goes into who goes into an investment with the idea that it's going to be worth nothing at the end? And I want to share a quick story and then Dennis, you kick in a perspective, but here's a great example, drive the point home. So anybody listen to this, let's pretend you buy an investment property, like a rental house. The concept is, or the purpose is, I'm going to buy this house, I'm going to rent it out every month. And if it costs me this much every month, I want to make this much every month. Like you want a little bit of profit, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say you do that. And your cost is like your principal, interest, taxes, maintenance. If you have a property manager and whatever all that stuff is, and you make a little bit of money every month. So you make a little bit every month for 20 years, which is successful. It's great. So then the concept is at the end, you literally take a piece of paper, you get a big black felt and you write free house. And you go tape it on the front door, you put the key in the door and you walk away and say, I'm done. Like, who would do that? Like that, anybody listening to that story would be like, Greg, that's stupid. Okay, well, change the name from rental house to business And that's what 95% of business owners are doing.
I have a client right now looking to acquire an extension to their business, and they happen to have somebody in the industry they're looking to acquire who is shutting their doors, right? And he's like, hey, Dennis, I think I want to go buy that business. So for context, this couple he's buying from has been in this industry for 25, 30 years. It's been a long time, but their equipment is completely worn out. Their client list, when we looked at the client list overall, he's already doing business with the vast majority of who that person is doing business with. It would just be an extension of his service somewhere else. This person's looking to sell this company because her and her husband want out of this company, and they've been doing it for a long time. They want him to pay a premium, but when you break down what the business is worth, the answer is absolutely zero, because it's not even worth offering money for the contact list. He already has the contact list. It's not worth offering money for the equipment because we'd have to take it from there to a scrapyard and go buy new equipment anyway. So that's the equivalent of having a rental house that you've done your entire life and you've tried to make money from it, and you go, you know what, I'm done. I'm just going to let whoever wants this thing take it over, but it's been condemned. It's covered in mold. They're just going to bulldoze it because there's no value there anymore. It's a tough situation where most people find themselves in, and they never intend to get there when they start the process. I don't know anybody I've ever come across who says, yeah, man, I'm going to go start my plumbing company, and in 10 years, I expect to lose my house, be indebted to the bank, be struggling to pay my bills, and my family is separating because there's been so much tension at home because I just can't make the money in. And quite frankly, I've tried to hire people and they made my life worse. Like nobody sets out with that intention to do it. They think that they're going to be that 5% that makes it, that they may not be the next Elon Musk, but they're going to be the $100 million a year company that takes over the world in their industry because they heard a YouTube video or saw a Facebook reel of some guy who was a plumber at some time who did that thing without knowing any context to it. Like, do you have any idea how many business coaches are out there as business coaches because they had a business before, but they don't tell you that the business itself failed? Like they didn't actually sell it for a premium. They just said, well, I ran my company for 20 years and then I got out of it or whatever else, because the success rate is so small.
And yeah, I agree totally with that. And then probably some other business owners just start because it's like, I want to be my own boss, pick my own hours, whatever, and make the $75 an hour as a plumber versus the 35. And they just don't even think about it as they could build an asset. And then therefore they don't treat it seriously. They don't learn how to become a great business owner, and then they just end up closing. But that goes back to the house story. Like if you're going to buy a rental house, like, because anybody who's been a business owner or is a business owner knows it comes with a lot more stress than just being the employee. Like you may not know that going in, but it is the truth. So if you're going to do that, that's like going to the rental house. Why not do it with the intention of building an asset? Because when you go to retire, having that asset worth, whatever, a few $1,000,000 or more is hugely different in your life compared to not having that asset. Like otherwise you got to be a plumber till you're 80 to still pay the bills. And do you want to do that? Like I've talked to so many tradespeople that, they're older and they work for themselves, or solopreneurs, and they're just like, oh my God, I hate this. My body's just getting banged up, but I got to keep doing it because it's what I'm good at. It's what I know, and it pays the bills. And my heart drops. I'm like, it's too late to rewind the clock. But if you'd made the right decision before you were 50, maybe even before you're 55, you could have built this into something you could have, like, then you wouldn't be in this situation, right? Where you have to work and you got to have the bad knees and all that stuff. So I guess, we don't say this to be doom and gloom. We're trying to open people's eyes to what a business can be, and then kind of maybe today get into a conversation around one of the major reasons they're failing.
I think one of the things to be very clear about here is that statistic of failure rate has nothing and takes into consideration revenue, meaning the revenue doesn't matter how high the revenue is, the stats of failure don't change. I mean, Greg and I have had enough clients that are doing in the millions in revenue, but are facing the exact same problems and challenges and frustrations as somebody who's just a chuck in a truck. Like, it's not the revenue that's going to save the day. It's not more sales that are going to save the day. It's not like these people didn't go out there and work their butt off to go generate more. It's that the more wasn't the answer because it doesn't fix the foundational structure problem. It's the whole concept of building a house on sand. I can build the best house on sand with no foundation, and the first storm comes up, the first tide comes up, and it washes the entire thing away because it was never built foundationally properly to ever get into something that's sellable down the road. And go back to the failure rate just for a second. I talked to a gentleman who's part of one of the biggest business brokerages in Canada. He's a business broker. He buys and sells businesses for people, no different than a real estate agent. He told me 70% of businesses that get listed with their firm do not sell. Nobody buys them. That is a massive number. And he says of the 30 that do, the majority of those ends up with the owner of it walking away with way less than they anticipated because the buyer wasn't willing to pay for it.
And they vendor finance, which says it's not worth anything.
And vendor finance means that the owner is willing to let you pay them in payments to take the business over versus going to a bank to get the funding and getting the cash.
Which means the business wasn't worth much if the owner is willing to finance it.
Yeah. So the question is why? Why is the failure rate so high? For me, there's a couple of things. Number one, proper real business education, I'm sorry, is not taught in schools. I've worked with enough people with their master's degree in business, and we talk about the concepts that we talk about, the structures that we talk about, and they've got no clue because they never learned it in school. And these are people who've got 6 years of education in that field. So the business education field is designed to teach you how to be a good middle manager for a major corporation. The second reason is there's a lot of money in business failures. Like debt is a commodity. People buy and sell debt. Your assets are a commodity to somebody else who lends you the money. Like there's a lot of money to be made for your business to fail that doesn't go to you. So why fix a system that pays me if you fail? So I'm not going to educate you properly to win. And then I think the third major challenges are major corporations. If they find that you're mildly successful, we either do one of two things. They're going to buy you out or they're going to drive you out. And the only reason they can drive you out is because you don't know how the game is played. If you knew how the game is played, they couldn't drive you out. So they're going to buy you out. And they're going to buy you out at a number that you're comfortable with, but probably not at a number you're worth because they know what they do, what they're doing, and you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And it goes back to our little story from the beginning, that great chef, mechanic, whatever it is, they go start a business, and Dennis just said it, like, how's the game played? Just because you're a great chef, plumber, whatever it is, it does not, like, knowing how to run a business successfully is a completely different skill set. And they don't realize that. They think because I'm a great chef, I'll be a great business owner. It's a completely different skill set. And then the issue is, we all do this. Every human being alive does this. Human ego kicks in a little bit. And if you kind of think about the community, everybody's like, oh, they own the local whatever. They're the local plumber. They own their own business. And look how great they're doing. Or they have a coffee shop and look how great it is. Or they have whatever it happens to be. And from the outside looking in, the expectation, the assumption is if you own your own business, you're successful. And therefore, there's a lot of undue pressure on a business owner to appear successful because the assumption is you're successful. And it's a self-fulfilling, like, it's crazy. And then because of that, I guess what I was trying to say is a self-fulfilling prophecy that the business owner is like, they start to believe that, like, because the community believes a business owner is successful and has a lot of money and does really well, then I have to show him that. And then as I try to show him that, I start to believe that. And then next thing you know, time goes by and I lose my business and close. And then everybody's totally like, what happened there? And it's a total shock, but it didn't need to be that way. If the business owner just get out of their own way and realize, like, it's so funny, like, you could own a business, say a coffee shop. It's because it might be an easy example. And maybe you're fantastic at being a barista, making coffee, know which ones to source out, whatever, knowing how to work the cappuccino machine. But now someone says to you, you should carry gelato. Like, you're this Italian coffee shop, you should have gelato. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. But I don't know anything about it. And my whole coffee shop concept is I roast my own beans. It's authentic and all that stuff. And maybe you make your own cannolis and sell them and it's all authentic. And then someone says, you should have homemade gelato. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's a great idea, but I don't know anything about it. Human ego doesn't get in the way there. You're like, I got to find somebody who knows how to make me homemade gelato. Awesome. But human ego gets in the way and doesn't allow you to find somebody to help you learn how to operate your business profitably, because if that doesn't work, then all of it goes away.
Well,
It's an interesting
the
dichotomy.
challenge there, though, is who do you talk to? right? Like if you take a look at accountants look at numbers all day long. So people go, well, I don't need to
They
know my
must
numbers.
be.
My accountant will tell me
Right.
if I'm profitable, not profitable. And they forget that your accountant's major role is your taxes, not your operations. If you look at the amount that you pay your accountant to do a year end, they're not spending that time trying to counsel, guide, everything else you through your business because they don't have the money to do it because you haven't paid them the money to do it. And they might not even be the expert in the field that you're in to be able to guide you on how to do it. And then you've got people who failed in business who are now coming back and saying, no, I can coach you on how to run your business. Or, you know what, I thought I wanted to be a business coach, so I went and bought a franchise agreement with a major coaching franchise thinking that they're going to teach me everything I need to know, only to find out that person doesn't know anything. Or you run into people who specialize in very small segments of business. Well, I am a specialist in systemization. Great. You need systems for sure. What are you systemizing? If you don't know the numbers, the systems don't matter. Well, I'm going to go hire an HR guy because I need better HR things. So it's not that you're intentionally ignorant. I think people are intentionally trying to figure this out, but the understanding of actual business knowledge is such a closely held secret that who do I even talk to? Like I've even been to BNI groups and networking groups, and you end up in a situation where everybody's giving advice on what worked for them, and they're trying to apply what worked for that guy to their business, but it's a different concept. But the person that applied it doesn't really know why it worked, but that it worked. And so like you have this whole smorgasbord of really bad information that's completely disorganized that you're supposed to somehow read 3 or 4 books about how somebody got successful or watch 2 or 3 YouTube videos or who's the next big guru all over social media right now who's making millions of dollars selling his program and is saying things that sound really smart, but when you break it down to practical application, doesn't actually work. So who do you actually listen to and turn to when you need advice? And the fortunate thing in the situation that Greg and I are in is his family got a ridiculously high level of business at a time when even today it's rare to get to that level of business. So you don't have very many people who play the game at an effective level who actually understand how the game is played.
You're making me think as you're talking about this and back to like my daughter. We were in the sporting goods and business that included footwear. So of course my daughter would get cool shoes at a young age, right? And we'd be all excited to give her the coolest, newest shoe, keeping in mind she's like 6 months old, you know, but it's the coolest, newest shoe for a 6-month-old. And it's got this feature and that feature. And, you know, like I'm being a little sarcastic here, but she could go play tennis in them and she could climb a mountain in them and whatever, but she's 6 months old. So we give her these shoes on the floor. She doesn't even understand what they're for. So they go right in her mouth, like chewing on them or playing with them or swinging them around or throwing them or whatever. Doesn't even know it's a shoe. So to your point, it makes me think business owners get all this advice, but if they don't learn how to play the game of business and understand that thing they're being advised on, like how's it actually impact the company? Like what should they actually be trying to achieve from that? Then they can make better decisions. So I want to give an example that for me personally, anyway, and I know this bugs you too, but I get my bee in a bonnet on this one, but every company on the planet needs a marketing plan. Obvious, because we all need new customers. Marketing companies, let's say the marketing industry, in today's world seems to want to promote the idea that you should be spending somewhere between 10, and I literally just heard this yesterday and I just like, it just want to make my fucking brain explode. Like I had blood coming out my ears in this meeting because it's being recommended to spend 30% on marketing. Okay, time out. If a business owner understands their financials and understands that's the revenue that comes in from the customer, and portions of that revenue have to go to different things, but all of that needs to be less than the revenue. So you're left with a little bit at the bottom and you can make a profit. 30% of that goes to marketing. You're only left with 70% to go to everything else. Let's pretend you want to make 15% profit. So now you got 30% to marketing, 15% to profit if that's what you want. You're at 45%. You're left with 55% to go to staffing, rent if you have rent, bookkeeping, accounting, utilities, wages.
I mean,
like
assuming
so
you can make that margin.
Yes, right. So,
Right.
but all that has to go to that stuff, and it has to go to the product you buy. Like if you buy a product or a service, so if you buy a product, if you're a company that buys a product and sells it, most of those kind of companies make less than, like, whatever they sell it for, less than 50% of that goes to them. They usually got to pay more than 50% to the vendor to buy the product. If you're buying a labor hour, so you're like a trades company, or you're a dentist office or a lawyer's office or whatever, or a clinic, you're buying that hour from whoever's providing that billable hour for you, working for you. You pay that person, whatever, $40, or probably not, that's probably high, like $35 for that hour. And you go sell that hour for a certain price to your customer. Maybe you sell it for $60. Well, that, if you take that 60 you sold it for and you minus the 35 you paid the employee, you're left with 25. Well, if 30% of that $60 goes to marketing, you start to, like, there's no way you can make money. So I think what Dennis is saying, like, on how to play the game, and what you alluded to earlier, like, we all get all this advice on how to run a sales process, how to,
We watch our sales books, we go to our business seminars, we do the things we think we're supposed to do.
Exactly. Let me do the marketing for you. Let me, whatever it may be, do your HR for you, whatever it may be. That's all great. Even let me be, like, I saw a post, our business put a post out the other day around a subject like this, actually exactly this subject that we're talking about right now. And someone put a comment in there and said, well, that's where a good fractional CFO comes in. And I'm like, maybe. And I don't mean to sound sarcastic here, but if that person that's advising you, so Dennis said, where are you getting your advice from? If that person doesn't understand, like, why those numbers and how they all got to fit together, then you're very, very susceptible to making a bad decision.
Yeah. So I look at it a lot. Like, I think one of my favorite movies on the topic of business that nobody talks about is actually the movie Moneyball, right? Because Brad Pitt in that movie is a brilliant synopsis of how the baseball game works. Like, one of his lines in there is, if the guy's such a good hitter, how come his stats show he doesn't hit very good? Like, he broke down the game, the character broke down the game in that movie about how many bases does somebody get to? What do their player stats actually look like? What do their averages actually look like? And it became about base hits win games, not fancy home runs winning games. It came away from, I'm not paying for the $1 million player. I'm paying for cheaper players who actually get on base and can actually play the game and win championships. So where most people get lost in business is the very foundation of it first. Is a fractional CFO a thing? Sure it is. Is it a valuable tool? It sure can be. What's the context? And people miss the context of the game. If I were to...
Like, are they just helping you lay your numbers out for taxes?
Yeah. Because I sat down just the other day with a new client who's starting up, who worked with a business coach for about 6 months, who focused on systems and that kind of thing. And I said, great. What systems was he putting in place and what numbers were you tracking? And the answers were, we weren't tracking any numbers. I'm like, well, if you weren't tracking numbers, how do you know that the actual systems were doing anything? It's like, well, I guess they weren't, because we're not any less tired. We're not making any more money. We're not, but it sounded all really good on paper. So if you want your business to be successful, there's actually some steps you should go through. The first step you should go through is, have you actually written down on a piece of paper anywhere what you want the business to pay you? Like, have you ever sat down and went, I'm going to go start a plumbing company, because if I run this plumbing company, I want to be able to live off of this much money per year for my family. And most people never start there. They go straight to I'm going to go start a plumbing company. And if I make enough revenue, then all of the other stuff should come out in the wash. But then it doesn't come out in the wash. So obviously I got to spend more money on marketing. And I was told 30%. So now I have even less money because it all goes out in the wash. And then I go, well, I just got to get systems in place, because obviously my systems aren't working very well. So now I'm hiring people and putting them into systems, but I don't have my foundation properly. So now I'm even making less money. And I had a client say to me at one point, he said, Dennis, I went from 10 employees and I made less money at 10 than I do at 5. I'm never going back there. So it's like, if all of these things people are telling you, 30% on marketing, hire more people, put in more systems, do all of this is the answer, then why isn't it working?
Yeah.
So start, first of all, I think when we got in this business together, one of the very first questions you ever asked me was, Dennis, how much do you want to make? And it's like, well, what do you mean? How much do I want to make? Well, how much do you want to earn that you want to be in this business? Because if you don't answer that question, maybe this isn't the right fit for you.
Yeah.
Go get a job, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things you drilled into my head from the very beginning was I an idiot coming into this industry? No, I did a lot of stuff. I understood a lot of stuff, whatever. But the foundational aspect of what your numbers say to you in the business determines the life or death of your business from the very beginning. And if you don't know those numbers, nothing you else do matters. And nobody teaches what you actually have to know to understand this business that you're in from an operational perspective. It's always the tax perspective. And
Yeah.
what Greg taught me and what his dad taught me was you start off with a personal goal. And from that personal goal, you build out the business on a napkin to figure out, does this business get me to a place personally? And if not, what do I have to change to get there? What do I have to add to get there? Or do I just walk away from it completely? Which I think is part of the reason why you were talking earlier about if you're the best baker, the best coffee maker, the best plumber, whatever, the failure rate's still just as high, because at the end of the day, when money gets tight and things get tough, what do? You default back to the skill that you know. And so you're not actually building the business. You're now fighting fires, trying to keep up with customers, working your butt off to pay off other people's mistakes. And you're not focusing back on why you got into this thing to begin with.
Yeah, I love it. And I think and it's going to sound like I'm repeating things we've already said, but I think this is important because it goes back to we're saying this great chef or great whatever starts a business, and then to Dennis's words, doesn't understand how to play the game of business. Well, what do we mean by that? So like Dennis is saying, start with how much do you want to make? And then from there, you can work the numbers to figure out what revenue you need, what gross margin you need, whatever those things are, what you can afford to pay on wages, what you can afford to pay on marketing, all those things. But then you go even one step further in the game of business is, okay, now I know that I got to do this much revenue. What does that mean? Well, you take that revenue and you start to figure out how many transactions do I need at what average transaction? And then those transactions are, well, how many do I need from my new customers? So I got to do marketing to get that. So how many leads do I need? At what conversion rate gets me how many customers? And then on the average transaction side, on the current customer side, how many transactions do I need for my current customers? Well, what am I doing to put in place a process to make sure my current customers buy from me again and buy more often in their best interest? So again, that's a process.
Without being manipulative and lying and full of crap.
Exactly. And on the average transaction side, like how am I driving that? Do I add more products or services? Do I change my price points based on what I offer? All of those, what I just said might sound super complicated, but it's not when you actually understand how the game's played, because the game is all about take that end goal and work it backwards. So if the end goal is revenue, work it backwards. If the end goal is profit, work it backwards. If it's how much I want to make, work it backwards. Like, if you start to understand that, it's like pro sports. I don't know if anybody golfs. A big difference between an amateur golfer and a pro golfer is a pro golfer going into the round knows on hole number one, my intention is to get a par because it's a tough hole. So how am I going to get the par? I'm going to hit the ball here, then there, and, two putt, whatever. And then on hole number three, it plays more to my game, my strengths, whatever. I plan on getting a birdie there. Okay, to get the birdie there, I got to put the drive here and then the next shot there so I can get a shorter one putt. Like they know going into the round, their intention. Now, life throws curveballs at them and they got to adapt, get it. Or like a distance runner, they're going to go run a marathon. They know every single mile, how fast they need to run that mile to get that time, to get that gold medal or whatever it is. And if they're off, then they got to make adjustments. Like, race car drivers or pro football, famously, the 2-minute drill. We got 2 minutes to get a touchdown. They know, they practice the week before the game. If we get to a situation where it's 2 minutes and 31 seconds left, here's the series of plays we're going to run to score the touchdown, to leave it with no time to win the game. And then if there's changes, then they got to adapt. That's understanding how to play the game versus let's just go out and play it and throw the ball to that person and hit the ball over there. And
it's almost as ignorant as finding out that you heard that Mike Tyson could make $30 million a fight. And so you decided to jump in to hire a promoter quick, jump in the ring next Friday and go, I'm going to go fight Mike Tyson and I'm going to get his $30 million for that fight because people make money in business. Like just because other people have been successful, they've gone through certain things to get there. And even when it comes to whatever it is, everybody who's successful at something starts with a foundation of what it is. And you can be a great plumber. Like, I think one of the things that annoys me the most right now is watching Facebook reels of industry-specific people who throw numbers out there as though it's somehow factual for everybody who might be in their exact same situation. And it seems like the biggest answer people have is, well, if you're not making enough money, you better charge more.
All right.
Well, but charging more put me right out of the market.
Yeah.
Charging more means I'll lose a whole pile of customers. It's not always the answer. So the answer to all of this of how not to fail is go back to number one, what do you want to make from the business? Number two, can you understand the numbers from an operational perspective? Now, what does that actually mean? There's a difference between a margin and a markup, and people get those confused. There's a difference between a variable expense and a fixed expense. People get those confused. They throw around terms like gross revenue, gross profit, net profit. All of this stuff makes people sound smart, but very few people understand what those terms actually mean. So learn the terms, learn what they mean, and it will restructure how you look at your finances. There's also people who believe that if I'm going to be in business and I'm going to know the numbers, I better have an accounting degree. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I failed math in high school. Like I rocked at math up until grade 9, and then high school math just absolutely kicked my butt. But I can build businesses because the math is actually very simple. It's not overly complicated, but it's taught as being overly complicated. And I have got no idea why, except maybe they're intentionally trying to get people to fail. So success starts with what's the numbers of the foundations that you have. And Greg, you and I have been in this for a long time. Nobody seems to want to know this stuff before they start. The only time they look for this stuff is when they're like, okay, I've got two options. Either I declare bankruptcy tomorrow, or I declare bankruptcy in 6 months, or I hire this business coach who will help me get there in 3 months. Like they think they're just going to throw their money away on somebody out of a last-ditch effort or hope. And we've turned a ton of businesses around by just fixing the foundations of the numbers. But where would these businesses have been had they never got to that emergency room to begin with? And being in an emergency room like that is one of the worst places to be, because all you ever focus on is how to not die, not how to actually successfully live and thrive.
Yeah. And it's, you're making me think something you just said, and I'm sure we've said this in another podcast, but it's worth re-saying. When they get in those situations and they decide, well, the back to what we said today, like, hey, I'm a business owner, so I know what I'm doing, and the community thinks I know what I'm doing, so therefore I do know what I'm doing. Next year might be better, so I just need more money. I just need an investment to get me through this.
I need an investor. I need a bank loan.
So they go borrow the money, and the first go around, let's assume they are eligible to get the money, whether it's a line of credit or a loan or whatever it happens to be, operating loan, whatever it is. And they go get it, and they get it at a reasonable interest rate. So let's pretend the interest rate's somewhere between, at the moment, 6 and 10%, give or take. And that'll get me through. And then they chew through that loan because they keep losing money. And now that loan's gone. It's like, okay, well, I learned from that. I think next it'll be better this next time. So then they go look for another loan, and then maybe they get more of a high interest one. They can't get a traditional loan. So now they're looking at like 15 to 20%, and they get it, and they keep losing money because they didn't fix it, and they chew through that. And then the big time danger zone hits. They start going to like the third, fourth loans, and these loans get up to
some 30%.
This should actually literally be illegal that this is allowed to happen, but they'll borrow these loans at 25 to 36%. And we've seen it. And the minute you're in that boat, boy, if you don't have, it would be extremely rare a company could borrow at 25 to 35% or whatever and dig their way out. Like the vast majority of them are not going to make it. There's got to be some perfect plan that makes sense. Most won't. And then when you get into those kind of loans, they want more security. So now you're talking your house, your investments, now those start to go away, and then you've lost everything. And we've heard of cases like that, right? So we beg of people, back to the original point, if you're great at your product or service, it's awesome. It means you should try and help as many people as you can help with that product or service, because it's fantastic for the community when the community gets a provider that's great at their product or service. It's awesome. But you can't help anybody or provide any product or service if your company goes bankrupt. And the fact is 95% are going bankrupt. And by far the number one reason is what we're talking about today. If you don't know the rules of the game, it's like a bunch of little kids trying to play some kind of sport against pros. You're going to get your butt handed to you. You're done.
Which is why so many big corporations are doing exactly that. They need your ignorance to win.
Yep. And my own opinion, I actually think a small business, we say small business meaning non-corporation, generally speaking, is better at their product or service. Yeah. And you can pretty much look at any industry. Like if you've got like a plumbing company that has 6 or 8 plumbers working there, those plumbers are probably better than the plumbing company that has like 200 plumbers. If you go to a restaurant, I mean, we can all pretty much say an independently owned restaurant is almost every time going to be better than the big chain restaurant. Coffee shops, a law firm, whatever it is, whoever it is, a dentist office, whatever it is, they're generally going to be better. The products will be better, the service will be better, and it's awesome. And the community needs and wants that to thrive. And my point is, if those small business owners become expert business owners, they know how to play the game to win. They actually have a competitive advantage over the corporations who are expert business owners already for the most part, but not as good at the product or service. And they're probably never going to be as good at the product or service just because the mass of people that work for them. And I think so I think that gives a small business owner competitive advantage if they learn to become the expert business owner. But I think the other thing is, from what I see anyway, I think communities would prefer to support the small business owner as long as it doesn't cost them a lot more money.
The dollars always go to the better experience. Always.
Yeah. As long as it's not super inconvenient or super a lot more expensive, they're going to go support the local business owner. Communities would prefer to do that if it makes sense. But in many cases, they're finding it doesn't make sense because the small business owner is not operating the game at the right level, and the customer knows it, and the customer's going elsewhere.
Well, and for me, that's why I think it always has to go back down to the personal goal you want from the business. Now, a lot of people say bigger is better, bigger is better, bigger is better. I think a lot of people go bigger because at smaller, they didn't know how to make money, so they assume bigger is where they make money. I know of a very successful chain store here in Alberta, started here in Alberta, who then expanded against financial advice because they thought what they were doing was good. That expansion drove them to pretty much receivership in a very short period of time. And now they're trying to rebuild back with a couple of locations and build back up again. They lost sight of why the business exists. I always support smaller companies because I do get better service because they're really afraid of pissing you off because communities talk and it's hard to get business back. And if these guys know their numbers, there's so many times I encounter this where I ask a client their goal and it's this big revenue number. And I always ask them why they want to get there. And the answer is, I don't know. So they're driving for this number they don't know why they want. And then I go, okay, well, let's break this back down to a personal goal. How much do you actually want for you and your family? And then we build the business around that. And they never needed this astronomical number to get there. They needed a considerably smaller number to get there. And at that considerably smaller number, their prices isn't ridiculous. Their market isn't oversaturated. They're not in a position where they're competing against everybody at a high level because they're trying to monopolize everything. They're winning and their family's winning and everything's going well. And they're not going to get into that bankruptcy phase because they know how to close it or sell it because they can, because someone wants to buy something that they have.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I think in summary,
build your foundation.
For sure. Yeah, but I was going to say before that, to give credit to business owners who are experts at their product or service. To be successful, your company needs to be an expert at its product or service. Doesn't mean you, the individual, need to be. Just the company needs to be. Somebody needs to provide a high level of service or product. So yes, that's important. That's great. And then that's why you got into the business. Part two, you got to learn the game. You got to become a expert business owner, and that will allow you to compete, but actually, in summary, will allow you to win because the corporations won't be able to compete with your level of expertise on the service and product.
I just want to clarify one thing. I think sometimes when I hear you got to learn how to play the game, it was indoctrinated for me for a long time that meant you need to learn how to be an asshole to get what you want, or how to take advantage of somebody else to get what you want. That's not what the game is. The game is understanding how the pieces move on the board. We used to play this interesting business game with a bunch of clients. And what I found interesting about the game was, while not everything about the game was true to business, you got a really good handle on how the other players play the game and the subtleties and how they play the game. And one of the things I found out in that game, plus other games I play with my family, is that the people who play the most selfishly often lose the worst. And the people that were playing the game trying to benefit others while benefiting themselves, the competition was closer to the end of the game, but more people were doing better than when the one guy was playing selfishly. And even the guy who was playing selfishly never really ever won by a huge amount, but everybody had more fun working together. And that's, I think, what playing the game is. It's knowing the subtleties. It's knowing how to play the pieces correctly. It's knowing how each decision you make impacts the overall bigger picture of your financials. It's knowing why you want to create a bonus program to keep your staff involved. It's knowing how you can structure the company to pay them a premium for what they do because their families want to succeed. It's when you understand all of that, the failure rate for business virtually drops off because the water starts to float all boats. And then when the big corporation comes in and tries to undercut you, tries to do whatever, you're already armed to fight back. You don't just have to roll over and accept that fate.
Yeah. And you're making me realize, maybe for clarity, we should define a couple of things. When Dennis says those pieces on the board and moving things and knowing what to do, let's give a couple quick examples. Someone says, a company comes along, a marketing company says, oh, for you to increase your revenue, you should spend 20% of your revenue on marketing. Well, do you take their advice, or do you, if you know how to play the game, you'll know what percentage of your revenue you can afford, which, by the way, 20 is super rare. Different example. Someone says, oh, for every employee, they should generate X amount of revenue. So your wages should be this percentage of revenue. That's going to vary based on industry, based on company, based on situation, geography, all sorts of stuff. So again, if you don't understand the numbers behind that, then you're getting bad advice. People will say, you need to price your product or service at this number. Okay, well, you're the industry expert. I'll follow that. No, you need to know what gross margin percent your company needs to acquire to be profitable, and then compare that price to the market. And if it's too high, then you got to learn other numbers you got to drop to make sure you can compete. Like, there are so many examples of this. Like, hey, you should move into that building and rent that building or that office space. And, oh, it's a really good deal for the area. Well, great, I got a really good deal. But if that really good deal ends up being your rent is too high of a percentage of revenue, you have zero chance of ever succeeding. You're
working
finished
for the
before you
landlord.
start. Yeah. So, or you should buy a new truck because, or you should buy this piece of equipment because. But if that piece of equipment, if you don't calculate how many customers, how many transactions, at whatever transaction, in other words, how many actual transactions do you need to do from that piece of equipment to make it worthwhile? If you're not able to understand that or calculate that, then whatever advice you're getting on that piece of equipment is useless advice. Doesn't matter how much they know about that equipment. So there's hundreds of examples. So that's just to clarify, moving the pieces around the chessboard. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And you're going to know that the best about your situation and your company. Now, if you don't know that today, that's the whole point of this podcast, is to say, you gotta learn that. If you don't learn that, all the rest are risks. Like, every time you go into a decision, yeah, it's a risk. Exactly. Like, when Dennis says calculated, it's, I know this is the number I need to hit because of this reason. If you can't answer the because of this reason based on your business's situation, then you're vulnerable and susceptible to what we're talking about. And that's really at the root of what we're trying to say.
And I think that's one of the reasons, like, you and I put it to a phrase, but I think we would agree with that. Every client, every business, every industry has a magic ratio. I can't take advice from a guy who runs a plumbing company in California if I'm running my plumbing company out of a small town of 3,000 people in Rimbey, Alberta. It's not, there's nothing. We're both plumbing companies, but the comparability stop after the word plumbing. And what's funny about the game is that you can run a $1 billion retail chain, or you can run a $250,000 plumbing company, or you can be the person who has the plumbing company, the electrical company, the shoe store, and the barber shop, because the rules, once you understand the rules, they're universal across every business. How they're applied changes, just like how the game of chess changes depending on who you're playing. But when you understand how the rules work, you transition into anything and you become incredibly dangerous. Now, there's this old adage that says it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. Yes and no. It will take me 10,000 hours to become an expert in something if I'm trying to learn it from scratch, have to make all the mistakes myself, have
on
to
your own.
Good.
Yeah.
I have to do all the good and the bad myself. I got to really just invest that time. But I know for myself that proper education drops that 10,000 hours significantly, because instead of having to learn how to walk, then run, then put on my shoes, I can get straight to punching. And I can have somebody that shows me the best way for my body mechanic to throw that punch versus somebody else who's got a different body mechanic throwing that punch. That coach will take me a lot further faster than me trying to figure out how to box on my own. So business is the same thing. You get that core foundation correct, and the learning curve isn't 10,000 hours. It's drastically shortened. And then you spend the rest of that time becoming good at the subtleties, not at the big things, because you've already mastered the big things.
And I just for an analogy for people about, your point about the traditional numbers by industry will vary by company situation. Pro sports is just an unbelievable example. Like, you can pick your sport. You can have, like, if it's basketball, someone could tell you, oh, you need to have big men on the court and you're going to win. But then you take a bunch of big men and you go play a team that's got all smalls and they all have high percentage 3-point shots, you're probably going to lose. So you could be a football team that's like, they could say, well, defense wins championships, which is a famous saying in football. Yeah, defense is fantastic to help win championships. But if you're going up against a team that's got twice as good a running game as you and controls the ball, and the bigs, like the offensive line, are all huge, and they got 2 massive running backs that you just can't bring down. Yeah, it doesn't matter how good your defense is, you can't stop them. You got a problem, which means now you got to shift to scoring points. So, or maybe, passing wins championships, but then some teams can run the ball so well that you just don't get a chance to get on the field to pass the ball because they're on the field the whole time running the ball. Like, you could say, hey, you need a big serve to win tennis, but you bump into somebody like, I don't know, back in the day, Andre Agassi just had an incredible return. So you got a big serve. It doesn't do shit against Andre Agassi, who, by the way, didn't have a big serve. He just had an incredible return. So now you got to change your game. Like, it applies to everything. Yeah, those are just examples to prove your point you just said about every situation's different. And what we're really trying to say is to be able to understand how to apply it to your situation, like what actually makes sense, right? Versus getting advice that, I got to have a big serve or I got to have a big running game, because that may not be the right choice.
And it could all be true,
Yeah.
but how you're applying it matters too. So the failure rate has nothing more than the fact that I would say the vast majority of these businesses just have their foundations wrong. Like, the bones are probably good. The muscle's probably good. All of that's probably good, but I'm starting off with really bad feet and legs, and I've got no idea how to make that work for me. So we fix the foundation. You understand how that works. Like, there's principles out there, and this podcast is getting longer than expected, but there's principles out there that sound really, really great on paper. Like, there's a book called Profit First. Take your profit first and put it into a profit account, whatever you want that percentage to be. Well, if I'm losing money faster. Like, if I don't know where it's coming from, sure, I'm taking it and putting it somewhere, but I could be pulling from that account in 3 months to try to survive again. Like, it's a really great sounding principle. The application of it's completely different if the foundation's broken. So fix the foundation. Once the foundation's fixed, if you haven't built really crappy walls and everything else to the point where the whole house is condemned anyway, and you go back to fix the foundation, it's not going to matter. But once the foundation's fixed, it's amazing how much the rest of the business can fall in line once you get that one piece taken care of.
Thanks for listening to the More Profit, Less Stress podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform and leave a comment or review if you're feeling generous. To learn more about us and what we do, check out our website. Until next time, take care.